welcome. This is your host, Mitchell J. Rabin, and I'm very glad you're joining us again for the 15th annual Earth and Peace Day celebration. Our next speakers are a lovely couple, dear friends, colleagues, Dr. J.J. and Desiree Hurtak. They have founded the Academy for Future Science. It is an international NGO, a non-governmental organization, and it's working in over 15 countries. J.J. Hurtak is very well known for his book, his first book, The Keys of Enoch. It's internationally renowned, groups, people studying this work, The Keys of Enoch, all over the world. And they both go and visit all of these various groups and help them with interpretation and understanding. They are both social scientists. Dr. Desiree Hurtak is also a futurist and co-founder with her husband of the Academy, as I mentioned. And she has been an environmentalist as well and an author herself of several books. It's a pleasure to have them back. They've been on A Better World Radio and TV numerous times, as has Bruce been. And it's so wonderful to see you both. Welcome to our 15th annual celebration of Earth Day. So
thank you so much.
Please enlighten us, my friends.
Well, you mentioned one of my books. The other is Alternative Energy Sources, published by the Hydrogen Energy Society, where I outlined more than 40 years ago the need to use tar sands in Canada and throughout the world for alternative energy processes. And of course, Desiree and I also have worked, Mitchell, with indigenous peoples throughout the world. We are honorary members of the Xavante people of Brazil. And I brought with me one of the pictures. Perhaps you can see this if you look carefully, where we're being honored for our contributions to water systems and renewal in southern Brazil. We have had the opportunity also to work in Africa as a South African NGO at the United Nations.
Right, so although we talk oftentimes about consciousness, even higher consciousness, we're going to be the oddball out today and really talk about technology, which I know, Mitchell, is one of your favorites as well, because it's really important that we know what's going on. I think that's absolutely critical. And right now, our CO2 levels are the highest they've been in 800,000 years. It's amazing. And this is actually from NOAA, the National Atmospheric Research Association.
I thought Noah's Ark.
I know, we're ready for that one. But anyway, it's about 412 parts per million in the environment. It's so high, it's ridiculous. But, and it doesn't go away. That's the main thing people don't realize, that about 50% of what is in the atmosphere has been put there in the last 175 years. So it either stays there or it goes into oceans, or a little bit comes back to Earth and a little bit maybe dissipates somewhere else, who knows. But the interesting thing about the oceans, of course, and we see this, we have friends here right now here from Australia, the coral reefs are having a major problem because literally it's gone up something like lots of acidifications, like 30% of all that gets into the oceans. And there's an interesting technology I want to talk to people about. It's called BioRock. It was designed by some marine experts. And all you do is you put some metal bars like rebar around a certain structure, and you put minimum electricity. Right now, they're taking it from the local islands around Indonesia, but you could also just as well get it from solar, which they're playing with, this, that, and the other. And you actually start growing back or growing new coral reefs. And they use calcium carbonate. And literally, it grows faster with this process than natural reefs. So, it's just so exciting. And I think this time we're in that right now, I can pinpoint each of the problems, but you got to also pinpoint the solutions. And yes, it's consciousness. Yes, it goes back to what we have to do to literally change our consciousness of the planet, to move away from fossil fuels, especially coal, which is really polluting a lot of this stuff, and going into renewables. But, there are solutions. We've got to put the money and the energy behind it.
Years ago, as a consultant with Jet Propulsion Lab, I had the opportunity to work with ground penetrating radar as well as remote sensing radar over the Yucatan Peninsula, over Belize and Guatemala, and we, to our shock, found a, shall we say, a matrix of over 400 canals that were used to bring fresh water into the interior. We have a picture here, Desiree can show you. Remarkable juxtaposed are the jungle foliage without the canals, and then with radar, you see the close-up of the canals that interlock, explaining the ingenious hydraulic systems that the ancients were able to employ. The problem was people did not pay attention to the sunspots, and suddenly the whole civilization collapsed.
Right. So they don't really think anymore it's the Spaniards that came that wiped out the indigenous people that were there. It was environmental changes. It was climate change where water levels went down to 30% of their norm in the Yucatan. And they had a minimum of 2 million people at the time of Christ who mostly got wiped out in about 500 and 700 AD.
Actually, the National Geographic is now revising, suggesting upwards of 12 to 15 million people.
Well, yeah, and that's a question because they just see all these houses that were there. Let me go on to why airborne technology is very important. So if you take a look at methane, right, which by itself, it's about 20% of what we're putting out in the atmosphere, but it's like 80%, it's much stronger in terms of a greenhouse gas than CO2. And
it
now
also dissipates so much faster as well.
Right, it does. It doesn't hang out. So if we can stop the methane leaking, from various sources, we can make a real difference. So what they recently found from airborne and spaceborne devices is that oil wells really do leak. They leak methane. They don't leak just carbon fuels. They leak methane. And excitingly enough, there is now a company that's called Canadian GHG Sat, which actually has 2 methane hunter satellites going around this planet, measuring how much methane is coming out of the oil wells around the globe, because there's a lot of places that have controls. I mean, even in California, we have limitations on how much methane can be released, but no one was measuring it. Now we're measuring it. Now we're seeing, hey, these oil wells, and probably everywhere, but we're certainly monitoring them in California, have been leaking. And so that's exciting that we can start, we'll say, dissipating the methane. Yes, people blame animals and cows and everything like that, but let's get our own act in order.
Can they measure what comes out of cows?
I think they probably could, but I don't know if they've really looked that seriously.
Well, more seriously, to follow what Bruce has said earlier, we're looking at the rapid melting of Greenland, as well as the South Pole area of the Antarctic. And of course, it is anticipated that the sea level will rise dramatically 36 feet plus. It's interesting, last year, Science magazine, which is one of the best, had an article called Fallback Strategies, where they have outlined various technologies and various locations where urban populations will have to be relocated. Over 16 million people because of, as it were, population sources along the major oceans of the world will have to suffer a fallback, quote unquote, of going to better or higher land. In fact, the insurance companies will no longer pay for the bailout in Miami Beach along the Florida coastline.
They still are, but we have pictures of ourselves just standing on the street, standing in water, and it's just salt water coming out of the literally the drainage areas on the beach where normally rain would drain into the ocean. Now the ocean's coming up into the streets. It's very interesting.
But the good news is there are strategies that do work.
I think the most interesting thing, and the question that all of us should have, because we've been supporting the Hydrogen Energy Society since literally the late 70s, is our next car in 5 years going to be battery electric vehicles or fuel cell electric vehicles? And it's an interesting challenge that's going on right now with both of these car companies. Pretty much hydrogen was always able to take you farther on one charge, but now electric vehicles are catching up to that. So that's an exciting factor. There's a lot of other things. It seems that, just to wrap it up, because I know our time is short, that trucks actually will be the better for using hydrogen because you can have lots of weight. You can put tons of things in the truck and still run it with hydrogen. Whereas cars, if you're, going with one or two people, you actually probably will get a better efficiency ratio on electric vehicles. So if you're driving locally and things like that, and a lot of the electric vehicles are getting up to 400 miles per gallon on one charge. I mean, that's the newest going on.
And the only byproduct, of course, is water. The connection between a car or truck and a hydrogen source is only less than 5 minutes.
And I just have to say that we're kind of experts also in what's called Brown's gas, or HHO, oxyhydrogen. It's fabulous, and trucks are already using, especially in Canada, as a additive to their fuels to get better mileage. And everyone's looking, especially now, for better mileage. So it's exciting to start getting into hydrogen, to also have a competition going. And yes, there's more charging stations, right now with battery, we'll say EVs than fuel cell, but let's make that our challenge for the future. Let's get hydrogen out there with, again, only water.
So the bottom line is we need to put together the fantastic positive sociological and psychological impulse that will take us beyond the current challenge of whether we will endure biospheric collapse within the next 20 years. I'm an optimist. I know civilization has gone through many cycles, but humanity has come out, even humanity that has learned to, quote unquote, breathe underwater. So we must bring together a synergistic approach. The planetary sciences, the psychological and the sociological sciences, what I will call really the kickstart of having a higher consciousness, realizing that we are very, shall we say, endowed with gifts that can put us across the chasm of space.
So two more exciting things we just want to mention that we've supported also is saltwater batteries, or what's called sodium ion batteries. They seem to be able to actually ultimately compete with lithium ion batteries. There's not that much lithium on the planet. Yes, we'll probably survive for a while, using lithium ion, but ultimately there's about 1,000 times more salt on this planet than there is lithium. And even though right now there's a lot of competition going on with how good salt can really be part of this new battery operation, it certainly is clear that if you're having solar panels in your house, designing saltwater or sodium ion batteries will be fabulous for your house, for the backup storage. And I want to say one other point that I think is all really also exciting. You want to say about saltwater batteries? Why are we interested in that, Dr.
Because
Hurtak?
in Egypt, we found that the Egyptians made use in the underground hydraulic areas, what we will call saltwater batteries. And we actually have exhibits of this. So the greatest bread box or bread basket, shall we say, in the ancient East was Egypt. They knew how to use recycling of fresh water and salt water. But another point I want to say quickly is the sky and space is the new frontier where our satellites can monitor through remote sensing technology, topologies, changing weather patterns, and we can beam down in a matter of minutes information that can move the developing nations into a higher, shall we say, countermeasures of how to sustain themselves. We've done this in Africa with Mike Bauer using solar cells to make more refrigeration units available for African farms. So there's a tremendous renaissance of science that includes also work that you, Mitch, have been involved with in California that can turn the wheel forward and at the same time preserve human and social integrity.
And a final thing for us going into space, I look forward to EVTOLs, which is literally either self-driving or with one person. They're going to be like taxis. We're going to be able to go from the top of a roof in New York silently using EV, electric vehicles, to fly us to the nearest airport very quickly. Literally, you can get to 10 miles in 10 minutes without any traffic in New York because you're up above. I think it's so exciting. This is our future. We got to move forward. We got to put our money there. We got to put our minds there, and we're going to make a difference.
Positive thinking is going to bring us through. And each of us are, shall we say, citizen diplomats of a whole new structure of building a world safe and sound, consistent to what the indigenous call Mother Earth. Pachamama must be in our eardrums, in our heart, in everything we do. We are one global community waking up to the challenge of a new civilization, and Mother Nature is pushing us quickly into that reality.
Thank you for the great opportunity to share with you. We'll be back again with you sometime.
Sure will be. In fact, I'm not letting you go. I think I have to come out to Sedona so we can finish this conversation. But I do want to make a couple of points based on some of what you have both said here. I love you both. I so love the work you've been doing for all of these decades, such a contribution to our world. Even on 60 Minutes, there was a segment just this past week on the eVTOL flights. Futurist and green economist Hazel Henderson introduced me to technology that is a dirigible that is all based 100% on hydrogen. And it is going to be the new mode of freight travel at an entirely clean, fossil fuel free state. This is where we're going. And as you both so well highlighted, it's extremely exciting what's going on. And yes, JJ, your reference to what I'm doing with Blue Power System and having a totally off-grid system. So we're no longer investing in the monopolies of the centralized utilities that have got outages happening all over the place, all over the world, and certainly even our so modern country. So we have answers, as you were both saying, we have solutions, and I so applaud what you're doing in that space. So
Thank
thanks so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
coming on and continuing the work. Until next time. So, oh God, are we having fun yet? Oh my God, it's like old home week around here. These are my delightful friends and colleagues that are here to share their hearts and their minds and their lifelong studies. Bruce Lipton and the Hurtaks. It's just, this is the way it is, and there's a lot more to come.